You've spent the last 3 hours in this dark and murky, damp crypt. Going room by room, you and your allies have found what every room has to offer, and there is only one unexplored hallway left. As you make your way down, a sinking feeling drops into the pits of your stomachs, and you throw back and forth glances of what do we do next, when you realize you're at a dead end. But that's when you hear it. All it is a simple click. Happy Thursday and welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This, of course, is the Storycraft Society, and this week we are doing another review video. It's going to be a triumphant return to Nord Games. Now, if you have not checked out our Spectacular Settlements review, I will link that in the description below, but I will explain in that video why I think that Spectacular Settlements is the best book I've ever bought for dungeon mastering. It is no secret that I absolutely love the heck out of Nord Game products, and so this is not going to be any different. If you don't like me spouting about how much I love something, maybe not the video for you. Really like this book. But the book we're looking at is Treacherous Traps, which is the definitive guide to creating traps, hazards, and puzzles for your tabletop role-playing game, and I think that this is another just absolute knock out of the park by Nord Games. The quality of the writing in the book is top-notch, the physical printing of the book is top-notch, the art style in the book is my exact personal taste. If I had to boil it down to my favorite art style in any D&D books, I think Nord Games, in at least Spectacular Settlements and Treacherous Traps, seems to knock it out of the park. I could keep spouting on and on and on, or we could dive down to the table and look into the book a little closer, so I think we should do that. So let's jump into it. Also, be sure to like, comment, and share this video if you really like it or you know someone that would like it. It helps grow a small YouTube channel, and I would appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much. Down to the table, let's go. All right, so let's dive into this awesome book. So, first place to start, of course, is the table of contents. That's always a good spot. I will give a little honorable mention here. This foreword is so fantastic. Everyone should read it. Nord does a really good job of getting this kind of stuff right. It's one of my favorite things about their products. Take the time and read it. You'll be happy that you did. But we're not talking about that. Talking about table of contents. So here is what we're going to get in this book. The first thing that you're going to get is the introduction and then how to use traps. I think this section is really great. We're going to dive into a little bit of a closer look at that here in a minute, but then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what the book is, which is the level 1 through 4, level 5 through 8, level 9 through 12, level 13 through 16, and level 17 through 20 traps. Now that's going to make up the bulk of the book. It's even broken down further from there. Of course, we're going to look at that a little bit more in depth here in a minute. Then you're going to have a section on complex traps. That's going to be your multi-part, they have their own initiative count traps, which is really great. Designing traps, a really awesome section if you want to custom make your own. Random trap generator, you can literally roll on tables to try and randomly create traps. That's really fun. The trap-centric dungeon. Now that's an interesting one. Again, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look, but that's a section basically helping you to do a little bit better with your world building and how you incorporate traps into your dungeons, which is nice. Perplexing puzzles, that's really nice. That kind of pairs up well with ridiculous riddles. Those are things that I think a lot of DMs struggle with. So in this example, they give you some really good options there. There's subtle secrets. Now this is I will say the oddest section of the whole book. Again, we're going to take a closer look at it in a bit, but it's really about like adding intrigue and that sort of thing into your campaigns. Really useful information. I will say Nord's #1 thing is they provide you with so much information in their books that it's like sometimes it's overwhelming how much really valuable, useful information. It's never like annoying trash that isn't something that I'd want to use. It's always very usable. But like the subtle secrets chapter is just, it's interesting to go along with this book. Useful, but interesting. And then finally, Trapsmith Legends, which will include the Trapsmith background as well as a bunch of Trapsmith NPCs that your party could meet while they're out adventuring. So that's the table of contents. Next up, let's dive into the introduction and the how to use traps chapters. So the introduction is really nice. It just gives you a quick overview of all the chapters. Now I'm actually going to look at this in an example. The subtle secrets that I mentioned in the table of contents section, my question is, what's the point of this in this book? And their answer is, this brief chapter contains a selection of story, quest, and environmental secrets that can be used in your campaign. Again, still doesn't answer to me why that particular chapter is in here, but basically the introduction just explains what each chapter is. Then we go over to the more usable section, I think, which is the how to use traps chapter. It's going to tell you about trap entries, trap types, spell traps, hybrid traps, trap level, and lethality. This, of course, is something very important. If you're putting a trap in front of your players, you either need to accept its lethality, that it could kill your players, or put one in that isn't going to do that. We're going to talk about that here in a minute, a genius way that Nord has put together explaining all of that stuff. The purpose of a trap, this is very important. Is the trap meant to alert? Is it meant to block? Is it meant to harm? Is it meant to hinder? Is it meant to subdue? All very useful. The trigger and effect, countermeasures, detecting triggers, disarming triggers, detecting effects, disabling effects, and reset. All of this stuff is really, really useful in, deciding how you're going to use your traps in your game. But with that said, they also come in with my favorite part of any tabletop role-playing book, which is the traps as templates section, which is basically the authors giving you permission to take anything in this book and edit it and mess with it until it fits exactly what you want it to do. That's why we all love these games in the first place, is because we want to be able to make them special for our players. So that is an awesome last little section. So that's those two chapters, and then now we can move on to the meat and potatoes of the book, which is going to be the actual traps themselves. So over the next couple of chapters, we're going to be looking at the actual traps that Nord gives you. Now, what's interesting about this is that they separate them into levels. So obviously, the higher up you go, the more difficult the traps will be. And this will tell you the appropriate level party to throw the traps at. Now, just like Spectacular Settlements, this book is so jam-packed that it would take me way too long to look at every single page. And also, I want to inspire people to go out and buy the book. I don't want to just give away everything right at the beginning. So I'm really only going to go over this chapter, the level 1 through 4 traps, and then I'm going to actually go to the very end and point out a level 17 to 20 trap that I'm really in love with. To start this off, it gives you a wonderful intro, and this is connected to the artwork that's up here. Just very, very lovely. I've said it in my past reviews, and I will continue to say it. This is my favorite part of these types of books. It gets me into the flavor and the feeling of the book when I get to read stuff like this. But then it moves on to this traps table. And as you can see, this chapter holds every single one of these traps. This is a lot. And then to think that you could take and tweak them and edit them in later chapters, it's just so much information. It's a lot of stuff. So this traps table, which theoretically would allow you to roll either a D100 to find out what trap it is, or you can jump into the 5 different types of level 1 to 4 traps, which are setback, moderate, dangerous, perilous, and deadly. And then you can roll a d10 if you know the type of trap that you would like. It also gives you the page, which is just really handy. Moving on from there, we are going to look at one example of each type of trap. So the first type that we're going to look at is the level 1 to 4 setbacks. So these traps should present a minor inconvenience to the characters. Again, that's a very nice thing to know. Not meant to hurt them, not meant to kill them. It's just meant to slow them down a little bit. So the first one is Aging Offerings. It is a magic trap. It's meant for level 1 to 4. It is a setback and it's a hinder trap. Atop a shrine rests a copper bowl filled with gemstones. The trigger is a creature that removes the offerings from the bowl triggers the trap. The effect is Aging. A pulse of necromantic energy emits from the bowl, aging the thief. The triggering creature must succeed on a DC 10 con save or be magically aged 1d10 years. The countermeasures is a creature can infer the importance of the offerings around with a successful intelligence check, and detect magic reveals an aura of necromancy on the bowl. Just a little setback, fun for a level 1 game where you're just trying to hinder your players and let them know that what they're going into is dangerous and you just can't pick up any gemstone that you see. But again, very nice. Moving on, we're going to move on to the moderate traps. So these traps will probably harm characters of this level. Blinding Crystal. Now it's a hybrid trap, so that's one that combines magic and physical triggers. It's a level 1 to 4 moderate, and hinder trap. A small crystal sets on a pedestal. A rune of detection is inscribed on the crystal. So the trigger is a creature that touches the crystal, triggers the trap. The effect is blindness, and then there are countermeasures. A creature can spot the rune with a successful DC 12 perception check, and detect magic obviously reveals things as well. Once discovered, a successful DC 12 intelligence arcana check or dispel magic can disable the rune. We are moving on. Now we're looking at dangerous. Dangerous traps. These traps are likely to seriously injure and potentially kill the characters of these levels. So we're going to look at choking vapors. Now this is a mechanical trap, so there's no magical component to it. It's level 1 through 4. It is dangerous and it is harmful. The floor of the empty tunnel is paved with uneven flagstones. The trigger is when 20 or more pounds of weight are placed on the central flagstone. It depresses and cracks a glass vial filled with liquid. The effect is poison gas. That poison gas will cause a DC 15 con save, and then the creature will take 3d10 poison damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. That's a lot of damage, very powerful. And the countermeasures will be a successful perception check that reveals the hidden vial, and a successful DC 15 dexterity check while using thieves' tools disables the trap. So you notice they're getting harder and harder and harder to survive and harder to see as well. Moving on, we are going to look at perilous. These traps may kill the characters of these levels and will definitely injure them severely. Again, getting worse and worse and worse. So the one that we're going to look at in here is Glyph of Burning Hands. It is a magic trap, level 1 through 4, perilous and harmful. A glyph of warding burning hands is written in ash on the wall, floor, or ceiling of this area. The trigger is a creature that goes within 10 feet, just bang, triggers the trap. The effect is an elemental blast, 15-foot cone, DC 17 dexterity saving throw. Creature takes 3d6 fire damage on a failed save. The countermeasures are a creature can discover the glyph with a successful DC 17 investigation check, but to do so they would have to be within 10 feet of the glyph. Detect magic could also reveal the glyph. But here's where it gets interesting. Now you're talking about this amount of damage is going to hit a lot of folks, and they have to be within 10 feet, so it's almost impossible to disable or catch it. But boy, is it going to be hard. Perilous. And that's not even the top of our deadliness. We're now to deadly. And with deadly, these traps will almost certainly kill characters of these levels. Now, I'm going to be real. I don't know why you would ever run deadly traps. I've never run a game where I've wanted to kill any of my players. But they're here if you need them. The one we're going to look at is Blazing Ring Minor. That suggests that there will likely be a Blazing Ring Major somewhere later. This is a mechanical trap, level 1 through 4, deadly and harmful. A 1-foot thick ring of decorative stonework surrounds a 25-foot diameter circle area in the center of the room. The ceiling directly above the ring is blackened with soot. In the 5-foot square at the circle's center is something intriguing. There's a trigger. It's a weight-sensitive floor. When a smaller, larger creature steps onto the surface, adjacent to the 5-foot square at the center of the area within the ring, they activate a pressure plate. Part of the stonework slides away, revealing sprouts which pour flaming oil onto the floor. The effect is Wall of Fire. DC 20 dex save. On a failed save, a creature takes 5d6 fire damage. That's an average of 17 damage, and then half as much on a successful one. That's crazy. A creature that is adjacent to the wall can make a DC 20 con check using thieves' tools to end this effect. I mean, that's crazy. Very, very, very deadly. Countermeasures. A successful DC 20 perception check reveals the pressure plate, and a successful DC 20 dexterity check while using thieves' tools disables it. From here, we can see that there are level 5 through 8 traps. There are level 9 through 12 traps. There are 13 through 16 traps. There are level 17 through 20 traps. Now, I am going to look at one in this chapter. So the level 17 through 20 traps are the most difficult that you can look at. One of my favorites from this chapter, this dangerous trap called Acid Lock. And one thing that I've noticed is with a lot of trap books that I've seen, or trap related things, or advice that people give for traps, is as you go up in level, it seems as though the traps get more complicated and more complicated and more complicated. And I don't think that that's good design. I think that there should just be as many simple traps for level 17 to 20 as there are in level 1. So this is a perfect example of it. This is actually a lot shorter than Burning Ring was. This is it. Boom, right here. It's called Acid Lock. It's a mechanical trap of level 17 to 20. It is dangerous and harmful. This sturdy adamantine door has an incredibly intricate locking mechanism made of burnished metal. Although dented in places, the door looks incredibly sturdy. The trigger is if you use the wrong key for the lock, it triggers the trap. The effect is an acid blast. The creature must make a DC 15 Constitution saving throw, taking 15 D10, 82. I mean, it's level 17 through 20 characters, but that's still a big number. Acid damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. The countermeasures are a successful DC 15 Wisdom Perception check reveals the trigger, and a successful DC 15 Dexterity check using Thieves' Tools disables the trap. That's very simple, very straightforward, but still able to challenge your level 17 to 20 players. That's the gambit of what you can get. Now, of course, there are much more complicated traps if you want them. And speaking of that, we're going to be moving on to the next chapter, which is called Complex Traps. So the Complex Traps chapter is going to give you a little bit of introduction, and then it's going to tell you how to read a complex trap. Now, it's going to say the dynamic parts, things like initiative, which is that it takes its turn like a creature. Active elements, when a trap acts, it produces specific effects. Dynamic elements, some complex traps have threats that increase in severity over time. And then constant elements, a complex trap can damage or affect creatures even when not taking its turn. So there's a lot of things that go into the complex traps. Now, I'm not going to go into these as specifically as I did in the previous chapters because these are more complex and it would take me a longer time. But what I am going to talk about is two specific examples. The first one, which I really like, is Wall Blade. It's a mechanical trap for levels 1 through 4, moderate difficulty, and harmful. Now, with that, there's a whole big write-up on it here. It's a low-level, harmful trap, but then at the other end of the spectrum, Storm's Run, which is a hybrid trap. Now remember, that's magical and physical components. This is for level 17 through 20, dangerous, but it is just a hindering trap. There's just such a wide gambit of traps that you can get, like low-level damage ones, high-level hinder ones. There's just a ton, and so these are all of your complex traps in Chapter 7. Next is designing traps. Now this chapter is very nice because it will go over the aspects of how to design traps, but that's not my favorite part. My favorite part is these reference tables, and I like how this breaks down really complex and kind of heady information and makes it very simple. So let's take a look at some specific examples from these reference tables. Trap attack bonus and save DC. Then this moves on to single target trap damage, which is at levels 1 through 4, how much damage should a setback trap do? 1d10 worth of damage, average of 5. But at level 17 through 20, a setback should do 5d10, an average of 27. It does that same thing for multiple target trap damage, as well as trap spell level. This is a very useful thing. Trap creature CR. So this is if a trap has or summons creatures. That is what you should expect out of that. And then of course, lastly, there is trap duration. How long should a setback trap last for levels 9 through 12? And the answer is 10 minutes. Your next chapter is your random trap generator. This is really nice because it gives you trigger and effect generation table, and it will help you by explaining every single one of these. Now, I think that this section is so crazy because it gives you a whole ton of triggers and effects that will all directly affect your random generated table. And then they give you all these pages. It's a lot explaining every single trigger and effect. Look at all these pages. It's lots. All this. So you could even take this chapter and then take it back into creating your own trap section and just build some major complex and really ridiculous trap. So the next chapter is all about building a dungeon that is focused around traps. It's got a lot of tricks and tips in it. Things like traps for small spaces, traps for large spaces, traps for corridors and passageways. All of these will give you examples and explanations on how to run a trap-centric dungeon that's really focused and making each space feel like the trap was designed for the space that it was in. Next is perplexing puzzles. Now I'm going to kind of group this one together with ridiculous riddles. Both of these chapters are kind of similar in the fact that this chapter is going to be focused on riddles, where it's going to give you example riddles, and then of course perplexing puzzles will give you bunches and bunches of puzzles. It's going to explain the difference between a riddle, a puzzle, and a trap, and all of that will be provided in these chapters. Very useful, and again, it does that very quintessential Nord thing of taking something that's kind of amorphous and a little confusing that's out there and making it very simple and straightforward in their explanation. The next section is the question mark chapter, and that is Subtle Secrets. The Subtle Secrets chapter just gives you a few different ways to add a little bit of intrigue to your campaign. Again, I'm not 100% sure why this is in here. I love every word of the information that's in here, but I have to say, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Read it, enjoy it, because it's great, but still, you know, I have a question mark above my head about this one. And then the final chapter that we are going to look at is Trapsmith Legends. So what it's going to give is the Trapsmith background. This is a really neat thing where the Trapsmith lore is you love traps and you always have. The satisfaction when something comes together just right is a feeling you're very familiar with. You have always enjoyed tinkering with things and finding ways to defend your home or place of business with dangerous devices. You understand that traps can be and often are harmful, but you treat your profession with some degree of ethics depending on whether or not you consider the potential victims of your traps to be deserving of their fate. And then it's an entire background built around someone who just loves traps. But then we have NPCs and hirelings. It gives you the full write-up of them, their overview, their personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, a bit on their equipment, and then role-playing them. So for example, this fellow here is Burf Barbender. We also have Izzy Freeleaf. And of course, lastly, we have Max Rosewater. And then the legal appendix, and that is the book. So let's jump back up and get to the outro of this video. So let's sum up my final thoughts for Treacherous Traps. I mean, the pros obviously are, boy, it's just so deep of a well of knowledge for any game master. This will just absolutely help you if you don't like traps or you don't quite understand them or don't understand the fine inner workings and details of them. This is certainly the book for you. It's one of those things that if I hadn't read it, I don't know if I would have gotten the use out of traps in the future the way I will now. The only con that I can think of with this book, honestly, is that it's just so much information. It's like Spectacular Settlements. This isn't quite as thick as Spectacular Settlements is, but still, it just seems like there's so much information on every page that part of me finds it overwhelming to try and internalize and find use out of all of the info. I think it's more of a reference than it is a cover-to-cover read, but I read it cover to cover, so I guess that's not necessarily true either. But so, pros, lots of great information. Cons, maybe too much great information. But with that said, that is going to be the end of this review. If you enjoyed this content, definitely leave me a like down below. Leave me a comment of what you think of the book. If you have it, tell me what your pros and cons are. Definitely share this video with a game master that you know would enjoy it, or pick this book up for your game masters. They deserve the special treatment every once in a while. They show up every week ready to prep your game, so this is a way maybe that you could show them some love, or maybe don't buy them this book because you don't want them to use it on your favorite PC. But with all that said, please subscribe if you haven't, and until next week, I'll be seeing you. It's a good book. Get it.